Bonjour. I thought that would be appropriate for this part of the session where we talk about Translator. Okay, so now let's start to talk about Translator as part of this session. There are two parts of this that we're going to be talking about. The first part is translating speech, but actually that's going to be the second part. And this is a new API, which many of you may have already used inadvertently by using Skype Translator. Has anyone seen or used Skype Translator for language-to-language discussion? Okay, a few people in the room, so that's great. The rest of you need to go out and use it as well. So the first thing that I'm actually going to talk about and show isn't necessarily new, but it's still very relevant for the kind of applications that people are building day to day. How many of you have used Facebook or Twitter or any of these other applications that might be very social and discussion based? Okay, I'm pretty sure in most of these kind of applications you'd have seen people that are on your friends list or that you've subscribed to where they've posted something in a different language and you've seen the translate tag next to it so that you can translate that text into something that you can read. So we have a Translator API. It's been around for a little while. It is probably the best translation model that exists because it exists at multiple levels. The first of which is simply the ability for you within your application to make a call to the API and translate from and to any of the 50 languages that are supported. There is also a highly customizable translation model here. We have something called Translator Hub. This gives you the ability to do one of two things. The first of which is if you're working in a field that has fairly technical content or content that is fixed into a field like medical or something similar, you can train a translation model based on content that is specific to the domain that you're working in. The third part of this is the ability for you to work with humans to enhance or improve the translation model that's been created. So you get much better results out of the translation. There are a number of interfaces onto this API, including AJAX, REST, and SOAP. What we can see here is a list of the various APIs that are supported. Translate's the obvious one. Detect is kind of interesting, and we're going to be using this as part of the API set that we're going to be calling in the application in just a second. So what you can see is that there's obviously a number of different APIs that you can use inside of your application to support translation. So what we're going to be doing is enhancing the application that John and Ryan have already shown you. This is the application here. What I'm going to do is just launch the application so you can see what the application looks like with some of the translation features built in. What you'll see across the top of the screen is this FR inside of a combo box. And if I drop this down, this has been populated by the list of supported translation languages from the Translator API. So there are two different APIs that I can call here, one of which is to get the short form version of all of the supported languages, and the second is to make a call to get the long form version, like English or French or German or whatever else. So I've populated this list when the application initializes to build in that list of supported languages. Next to that is a translate button. In a second we'll dig into the code and find out what's behind that. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to search for something using the excellent work that John and Ryan have already put into the application. Thank you. And then what we're going to do is real-time translate the text of the results that we get back into a language that we choose from the list. So I'll show you this working first, and then we'll dig into the code behind to find out just how easy it is for you to hook this up inside your application. There's something to note about translation, though. Translation isn't straightforward, right? Many languages have words that are the other way around or switch genders or whatever else, right? So when you think about translation, it's not purely word for word for word for word. There's also understanding and intent that forms that as well. If you were to ask two professional translators to translate the exact same document, the chances are you'll end up with different results from each of them, right? So it just gives you some impression of how hard this kind of stuff is. Okay, so I'll show you this working first, and then we'll go take a look at the code. So let's search on something that I think is fairly relevant right now, and that'll be something like Booty McBoat Face. Is that a good term to search for? Yes? Okay, good. Right, so I'm going to hit search. And yes, there we are. We get the results back. So that's a tick in John's box there because we got the results back for John, right? And I should be able to also click into news and get a list of trending or news articles as well. Okay, so why don't we just do the translation? I'm going to hit the translate button. And what this is going to do, we'll see the code behind in just a second. But what this is going to do is reach out to the translation service. It's going to detect the language of each of the items in the list of returned results for search and news, and it will translate only the subtext here, not the title, right? And the reason why I'm doing that is to show that the topic itself is remaining the same. We could obviously translate the title as well, okay? Just to show you that that's also being applied onto news, I'll click news and you can see that that's there as well, right? Amazing, right? But wait. Okay, let's go take a look at some of the code. Okay, so in the application, we've obviously got this translate button. If I go and have a look at the code that sits behind this, what we see in here is that I'm getting the list of the count of the number of items that are in the web results pivot. And what I'm doing is setting the snippet, which is the subtext within that article, to a call into a class that's part of the application called Translator. And we'll take a look at how that gets initialized and how the APIs are used in just a second. Translator.translate, and then we pass in the initial language, the initial text for that article, followed by the language that we want to translate that article to, right? So you can think about this as being a string result, the string input, and the language choice that you want to translate to. You can actually pass in to and from, but we're actually using a different API. We're using an API inside of the translate class to detect the source language, so we don't need to pass to and from into the translate API. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Right, so that's what we're doing on the web results, but we're actually replicating the exact same thing for the Bing News trending news results as well, right? So it's the exact same code. What you'll notice is that there is a difference here between snippet for web results and description for the trending news results. And that's the only real change between these two things. The underlying code is exactly the same. Right, so let's go take a look at the translator class, because this is where the translator work is happening. So very much like the work that John was showing you earlier, we do need an authentication token. We need to generate that every 10 minutes. We've got code samples online on MSDN that show you how to do this. I think we're also going to post this sample online to show you how to use both the Bing, the Lewis, and actually the translator API, so you can pick this up and see how that works. Okay, so here's the translate call. What are we doing? We're making sure that the length of the input string is more than 0. Great. We're then making a call to detect language, which we'll take a look at in a second. And we're using the return from that as the from language and taking the to language, which is passed in from that combo box within the application. So that's pretty straightforward. We URI escape the input string that we want to translate, because obviously there will be things like spaces and exclamation points and these kind of things in the string that we want to translate. And then we make an HTTP REST call out to the translator service, passing the authentication token in as part of the call. When we get the results back, we simply walk the XML data that we get returned, pull out the string from that, and then return that back to the user. So that's pretty straightforward. For initialization of the class, we pass in the authentication keys that are required to build the token and then go and generate the token. There's a fair amount of work in there. It's pretty straightforward. It's documented on MSDN, so I'm not actually going to spend any time walking through that part of it. In order to detect a language, this code should look very similar, and obviously we're using this as part of the translate function. We're passing in the string, we're getting the language back. We're calling this basically the same endpoint. We're passing in the API that we're interested in, which is shown here, which is detect. We're passing in the escaped string, passing in the access token, and then making the call, parsing the XML, and then passing the results back. This is the call to get all the languages. This returns a list of languages that we then use to populate the combo box back in the application. Again, this is fairly straightforward. We make a call to this API. This will return an XML document to us, and all we need to do is basically just read through that XML document and add each of the items into a list that we then return back to the user. So that's pretty much it. Making use of the translator APIs is pretty straightforward. You can see just how easy it is to add support for translation into your application, right? Great. Okay, so that's the translation part. Who would like to see a technology that we've released 200 years before it should have been released? Not a single hand went up. I can't believe it. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I guess that's the end of the session. Okay, so the thing that I'm going to show you now is the real-time speech translation APIs. I'm sure every single one of you have seen Star Trek and the Universal Translator, right? Nobody watched Star Trek? You're kidding. I thought there were developers in the audience. Okay, so the technology that we're going to show you is the Universal Translator, the exact same technology that's built into Skype Translator, but available to you as an API for you to use inside of your applications today. So that's pretty neat. Why might you use that? Okay, we did the demo. So why might you use that? So there are a couple of things to think about here. When you think about speech to text, right, you say some words, that gets translated into a set of results. Speech to text has been around for a little while. But when you think about speech to text, it's very commonly being used mostly for commands. You know, say something, get a result back, do something. The API that we are releasing now, that is available to you now, is real-time conversational speech support. So what you'll find when somebody is talking to somebody else, maybe in a Skype call or something else, that what they're saying is going to be much longer than the typical kind of speech-to-text type. And there's obviously going to be a lot of meaning and intent that is part of what it is that they're saying. So the way the API is built, there are a number of different pieces to it. The first of which is we have a WebSocket endpoint for you to stream PCM audio data to. So as you're speaking, that audio stream will be sent on the WebSocket for the real-time translation service at the back end to start processing over that data, right? On the receiving side, you get two return streams coming back. The first of which is a text-based stream. And this will fire for one of two different result sets. The first one is partial results. So if I'm saying something like, this is a sentence that needs translation, as I'm saying that sentence, I'll be starting to get partial results back from the translation service, right? So I'll get the text stream coming back that I could potentially show to the person that wants to see the translation of that, so they get a feel for what the conversation is saying even before the final results are available. We also strip out, as you're speaking, some of the most common kind of pauses and ums and ahs and gaps that might be in the sentence that's being spoken, right? So you just get the rectified text being sent back. Not only do we give you partial results, but we also give you full results as well, or final results. So within your first callback, you can switch on both partial and final results. Final results are fired when there is a half-second gap in the speech stream. That will then generate not only the final text results of the translation, but will also at the same time generate that second return stream which will be a playable audio stream of the translated voice as well. Okay, that sounds pretty neat, right? Okay, who would like to see a demo of that working? Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you two demos actually of this working. The first one, because I don't actually speak that many other languages, is going to be doing an incredible translation task of translating English to English. Okay, so the reason why I'm going to be showing you that is, so this is the code for the application. Actually, let me show you the UI for the application first. So the UI for the application is super simple. It's got a button, it's got a couple of text boxes. What? Oh, sorry, yes, projector, yes, my bad. There we go, the UI. Much better. Okay, so what we'll see inside of the UI is I've got a button that says capture. I've got an audio input device. I'm using Windows devices enumeration. I'm sure many of you have used that API to enumerate other hardware devices in the system. I'm using Windows devices enumeration to find all the audio input devices in the system. And for my device, I should find two, one of which is the mic array built into the laptop, and the other one will be a USB headset that's plugged in. Obviously, with the USB headset, I'm going to get much better audio definition than trying to talk to the laptop from a distance. And then what we're going to see when I click the capture button, we'll set up the PCM audio stream for streaming the audio to the translator endpoint. And once that's ready to capture audio, we'll see this audio capture status change to the word ready. And then as I'm speaking, we should see both partial and final results being displayed in this field here called output. Okay, so let's go to the code, and I'm going to search for the word final. So I mentioned there are two callbacks that get called back from the real-time speech translation API. This is the display result callback, and I'll show you in a second just how this is set up. And you'll see that we get a string sent in as the result from the callback, and I'm simply looking for the tag type as final or partial, and I'm putting that on the front of the translated text that I'm getting back, and then because it's returned obviously on a different thread, doing a dispatcher run async to then set it up in the UI, right? So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So if I put the headset on now, I should be able to run this, and what we should then see when I start this running, okay, so let's take a look in the combo box, and we can see I've got my mic array and the headset. So I've got the headset selected. When I click capture, we'll see the audio capture status change, and then I should be able to start speaking. I know I can start speaking. And then we should start to see some output in the output window. If I start speaking, we should see some output in the window. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, English to English translation. Crowd goes wild at that point. Okay, so that part of the demo is literally just to show you the partial and final results you're getting back. All right, got it? Okay. Right, let's just take a little closer look at the code within this application. This is a simplified version of the application that John and Ryan have been showing you simply to set up the audio translation piece. Okay, so the button that I clicked, basically just switching the text on the button to either stop or start, and I'm saying capturing audio is either true or false, so I can kind of switch that. In here I'm calling start audio capture or stop audio capture. The audio pipeline is already set up. When the application initializes, I'm doing all the work to set up the audio input piece to capture the PCM stream. So that's not actually happening here, right? Okay, so we connect to the speech translation service. I've got a class that I've created which is called the speech translate client, and I connect And what I'm passing in is the language to and from, which in this case is hard-coded for English-to-English translation, right? So I've hard-coded it here. In reality, you would probably want to provide the user with some ability to select the to and from language based on profile or something else, right? Then the other thing that I'm passing in is the two output streams, right? The two callbacks, one of which is for the text result that we've already seen, and the other one is for the audio stream return, which will be the translated audio, which in this case would have been the, whatever it was I said, now some text appearing in the window or something like that. Okay, so after that, we can obviously go dig in and take a look at the speech translate client software, and that's where we're kind of making the calls out to the speech translation API. But I think, given that we've only got a few minutes left, and we'll post the code online so you can go take a look at it, it would be way more interesting for us to do something incredibly clever, which would be to take the application that John and Ryan have built and make sure that I'm on the headset here. And rather than typing something to search, it'll be way more interesting to find somebody in the audience that speaks a language other than English, have them come up here and speak something as a search phrase, put that into Ryan's Lewis model to then search for whatever it is that they've said, and then take the results of that and drop it into John's search model to give us the results back into the application. Would that be the most amazingly cool thing that you've ever seen? Hang on, it hasn't worked yet. Okay, so do we have anybody in the audience that speaks a language other than English? So we've got a few hands going up. I'll pick the guy in the blue shirt here that I've never met before. Chris, why don't you come up onto the stage? Okay. So headset, and this is the exact same code that we saw in the simple translate, the English-to-English translation. So I'm going to hit the microphone button here, which is the start button that we saw in the previous app. And when this says ready in the text next to the microphone, then Chris will be able to speak in which language?
German.
In German. And then that'll be hopefully translated into English, and then we'll pass that into the Lewis model, and then from the Lewis model into search, and then we should see the results in the output. So here we go.
Zeig mir Bilder von lila Kühen, bitte.
So I'm assuming he was searching for purple cows. Okay, so there we have it. In the last hour, we've taken you on a bit of a journey. We've taken you through the process of using the Bing search APIs to search for web results, news results, images, and videos.